pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Thank everyone coming out on this chilly night, chilly evening. I have just a couple of announcements to make before we approve the agenda. First, this is a study session, so there are no public comments during study sessions. Residents may attend the next scheduled business meeting on December 5th or contact the board via email at boe@shenschools.org with comments. Oh, sorry, hold on one second. With comments or questions, policy questions or concerns are typically addressed by the board president, and operational questions or concerns are typically addressed by the superintendent and/or designee. I also wanted to let everyone know that in front of them, we have the final versions of the financial audited statements from our CPA firm. And you see the cover letters there from EFPR, the CPA firm. And then also before we get started, I wanted to ask Mr. Nardelli to come up and just explain or to share with everyone, how if anyone's having trouble accessing the links, there has been a change in Google security, and so he's going to quickly explain that for anyone that is having trouble.
Hello. So what Naomi is referring to is the board agenda every week comes out in PDF form. A lot of times when you open up the PDF, it'll just show up in the browser, the Chrome browser, and when you click on a link, it'll go directly to the presentation. Well, that all of a sudden stopped working, and it's because of a Chrome update that we had no kind of knowledge of or no control over. The workaround for the moment is to download the PDF to your computer, and then the links work fine within your Adobe, whatever application you're using to view the PDF. My experience with these kind of things is that, it could be within a couple of days, it could be within a couple of weeks that this gets, updated and resolved, and it'll start working again. So it's really nothing that IMS did or can do, but just kind of more of just a FYI.
Could you turn the mic on? We could hear you fine, but I wasn't sure that it was on.
I did.
It is on. Oh, okay. Okay, now I can hear you clearly. Thank you. All right, with that, can I have a motion to adopt the agenda? First is Tom, second is Stacy. All in favor? It is 7 in favor. Thank you. And we'll move straight into the superintendent's report. Dr. Robinson?
Sure. So tonight will be relatively brief, recognizing the time of the year. So we have 3 presentations, and I'm going to ask Sarah to come forward to introduce the presentation as well as our presenter, because I think we have a new person this year.
We do. Good evening, everybody. Happy almost Thanksgiving. Tonight you have in front of you our 23-24 school enrollment projections. This is a report that's put together for us for a number of years. We've worked with the Capital District Regional Planning Commission. There's a lot of data in here. It's very comprehensive. And I have Madison Harisco with me here tonight. And she's going to take you through Madison. She's going to take you through some of the specifics here, but I think just what I would note is what we see here year after year. This sort of confirms what we know about our enrollment based on our internal tracking of enrollment and our projections. It also then helps us to think forward in terms of what are the trends we're seeing, right? And so she's going to talk specifically about things like birth rates and the housing market and all of those things that greatly impact our enrollment and what we kind of see in terms of trends moving forward. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to her.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much for having me tonight. Again, my name is Madison Harisco, and I'm with CDRPC. A little bit of background on CDRPC, if you're not familiar, I'm sure many of you are. We serve as a planning resource center for 4 counties, Albany, Schenectady, Saratoga, and Rensselaer County. And we cover topics such as water quality, economic development, data analytics, and sustainability. So just a brief outline of what we're going to be looking at today. We're going to be looking at the actual versus last year's projected enrollment enrollment trends, trends in birth rate, housing data, and last but not least, the enrollment projections. I'm sure you've heard this spiel last year too, just a bit about our methodology. For grades 1 through 12, this is an example. If there are 100 first graders in the 2022-2023 school year and 120 graders in the 2023-2024 school year, then the grade to grade survival ratio is 120 divided by 100 or 1.2. Essentially, this is just looking at the retention over time. For kindergarten, this gets a little tricky. We need to look at DOH's birth data, and then 5 years later, see how many of those kids born enrolled in kindergarten. So a similar concept there. Just briefly, you can see the projected column is what last year's projections were, and then the actual enrollment is the 2023-2024 column. We're within about 1.3% accuracy. Historic enrollment trends. This is for total enrollment. We're seeing a decrease of 85 students from last year to this year. This is for kindergarten enrollment. There were 197 students enrolled in kindergarten this year, which is actually the same number of kindergarten students enrolled as last year. Now we're looking at K through 5 enrollment, which has increased by 15 students from last year. This is 6 through 8 enrollment with a 38 student decrease. Nine through 12 saw a 77 student decrease from last year. And now just touching briefly on birth data, again, this is derived from the Department of Health, which lags by 2 years. So you can see the columns in green are confirmed by DOH. However, those 2 black columns at the end are actually CDRPC estimates. And we take a look at 5-year average, 7-year average, and 10-year average, and kind of look at other factors going on in the district to estimate 2022 and 2023 birth data.
Madison, before you leave off that page, so looking at that, we, based on the birth rates for 2018, 2019, and 2020, going down, we should then expect that our trend ultimately 5 years out should also see a reflection of going down.
Correct. And you can see historically the births have been much higher than they are in the recent 5 years. So it'd be kind of difficult to reverse the downward trend of
without
enrollment.
a lot of years of uptick.
Correct.
Unless we have a lot of immigration.
Correct.
Which we have some of it. Okay, gotcha.
Also worth noting is the number of housing units. This is census data, and you can see kind of an increased number of housing units going on within the district.
So Madison, if you don't mind again, just for the purpose of the board, so thinking about that last slide, right? So number of kids being born during this, overall enrollment is relatively flat, and you would think that if this is going down, you should see a significant more, but this is kind of what's kind of creating the balance. With the uptick in housing, there's more possibilities of people moving in with kids, and it's kind of offsetting some of the potential loss with the reduction in live births. So, and that's why I think that's different, Shannon versus many school districts across the country who are seeing plummeting enrollments because they're not seeing uptick in housing. And so less people being born and less housing developments, and therefore it's not counterbalancing as much in some places.
Right, and we know that single family housing, so that's the second column from the right there, produces the most school-aged children. However, just other factors to note is that our average household size is decreasing in the region, as well as fertility rates in New York State are also decreasing. So those are some other factors that kind of play into the, not directly to our projections, but just some kind of external factors. We also look at existing home sales. By the end of the year, there's a projected 779 housing units sold within the district, and you can see over time the price of housing has increased within the district. So now for the projections, the green line, kind of hard to see, is the historic enrollment, and the black line is the projection. So overall, total enrollment is declining, not at as a crazy drastic rate. However, by the end of the enrollment period, there'll be 263 less students than there currently are in this year.
You know, before you go on,
Sure.
I think it was a few years back that they said that whenever the average house exceeded a certain point, like 300,000, that it typically did go down, and we're north of 400,000 now. The average, is that the average house
Or 25, I think, something like that.
Right here.
sale?
Yeah, it's close to
that one right
450,
there.
yeah.
Mhm.
Is that why it's trending down?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
So it was a few years ago, so I'm sure this number changes, it probably inches up each year, so I don't know what the new number is, but it was said that over a certain threshold, sales start to now, it's too expensive, and then sales start to go down. And so I noticed that it's north of 400,000 now.
Right, I'm not
So-
sure specifically about the housing information. This is something we get from they're a group called GCAR, and they give us housing data within each school district per year. So they provide us with this information.
Okay, thank you.
Did you guys, sorry.
Yeah.
I don't think you did, but I'm just gonna ask, did you guys take into consideration the fact that homeschooling is rising?
For
So-
us, though, it's very
It's actually
insignificant.
not here.
Is it not in this area?
No,
It-
not for us.
Well, it is in the capital
Because I
region.
thought it was.
Not
yeah,
for
it
us,
is-
Shen's pretty flat.
Sorry, yeah. He's correct. We were talking about this at BOCES, and for Shannon it's not. But it is in the BOCES region, just not for Shannon.
Again, our projections directly rely on historic trends, but we provide you with those external housing data just for your.
Yeah, so we look at homeschool, we're looking at special ed, we take all those things back to Sarah's point about our internal forecasts. We take those into consideration, and that indirectly goes into this factor into that. But we're not seeing a significant, nothing that, what in comparison particularly. Same thing with homeless. I think our homeless numbers dropped off pretty significantly, but nothing to write home about, so to speak. So those are factors that's impacting our enrollment. It's just a matter of fact that just not as many kids are being born and coming through the system.
We absolutely saw a rise in that, a few years back and during COVID, but it definitely has balanced out, and it's not something that we're seeing an increase in at this point. It's kind of just maintaining itself as it was.
Thanks.
Okay, so now we're looking at K through 5 projections, decreasing over time at the end of the enrollment period, which is 5 years, so we're looking at 2028, 2029. There'll be 154 less students in this cohort than there currently are. For the 6 through 8 enrollment, also slight declines. By the end of the projection period, there'll be 71 fewer students than there currently are. 9 through 12 remains somewhat stable, with a 5-student decrease from the current levels. However, it does appear to remain relatively stable comparative to the other cohorts.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, sure.
So, probably not, but in terms of the coming full-day kindergarten, over the next few years, we'll say, is that somehow woven in here in
No,
terms of projection?
not at this
all.
point, not at this
So
point.
presumably that number will go up?
Yeah, so not at this point, some point, could be next year, could be possible the following year.
Sure.
We'll have that conversation, but part of it, to be quite frankly, you're gonna see what happened.
Right.
Well, who knows, probably at least 6-8 years ago, we went through some kind of speculative kind of thing, assumption of looking at our 3rd grade enrollments, because typically we've seen what kindergarten numbers are, and then by 3rd grade you start seeing consistency, because it's where parents who send their kids to other places for their K, typically if they come back in district by 3rd grade, they come back. So they gave us some gauge. The piece that's unknown is the attractiveness factor, right? So all of a sudden, how many people who may have in the past not consider moving into the district because of the lack of full-day K, how many of those people will? What's that number to be seen? How many individuals who kept their kid in private parochial for all 5 years, who may have initially started there because of full-day K, how many of those people will come back to be seen? So I think right now our projection capacity-wise is erring on the high end of, when you think about the average class size, graduating class size over the last, who knows, even 10 years. High is like 825. And so it's a long period of time, right? And so if we look at that and having that as a high-end capacity ceiling versus right now, I think the average class size coming through the system will fall right around that 725 range. It gives us some flexibility, and then in time we start seeing what does that trend really look like when the building's up and running and being occupied and those kind of things. So at some point, 2, 3, 4 years out, this will be baked in, if you will, into the equation factor.
Okay, and probably one of the more important graphs, this is just looking at our projections over time. So that top one is our 2021 projections, that middle red line is the 2022 projections, and then the current year is that blue line at the bottom. So you can see where the projections have declined at a faster rate. However, just like a golden rule of thumb is to take somewhere in the middle of that envelope, the upper end and the lower end. So we're probably looking at something more of what our projections were last year. But that's visual. Also a plug for our capital region indicators if you're curious about more socioeconomic factors or demographics in your municipality or your school district. You can navigate over to this website and it'll give you some nice facts about the area. And if you have any questions or you want to follow up with me via email, again, my name is Madison Hriscoe and I'm with CVRPC.
Thank you, Madison.
Thank you.
Any final questions?
Thank you, Madison, appreciate it
Enjoy
very
your
much.
Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just before we transition, thanks, Sarah, before we transition out of this, it's interesting, right? So this average household median income, it has at least more than 5 years plus. Albany Business Review did a report and they basically reviewed the Shen community was a quintessential middle-class community based on economics. And that number was right around 100,000. So it's kind of interesting that it's still the standard, right, for what you want to say, 2 working households, 2 working individual households. So it's interesting to see how the stability, the economic stability of this region, even all the influx we have seen over the years has been pretty stable, and a lot of that is, I would say, attributed to stability of living in a government center. And government doesn't go out of business, and so most people maintain jobs. So I just kind of make that point, and I think it's something that we can't take for granted, but it's something that's beneficial to us as a system. So great, thank you. So the other presentation, Matt's here, and to walk through. You want me to scroll through, Matt?
Sure. Yeah, this was made in Canva, so I'm not sure there's a way of actually
Oh, who has it though?
pulling it up. It's okay. We can just use.
I have another presentation in Canva to be putting up, so I don't know whose Canva's access is it?
I believe it's Jules.
Oh, well, all right, let's just go with this one then,
Yeah.
because then we have to go find Julie's account and.
Yeah, it's all good.
Okay.
Can't get this to come up.
All right. So Becky, Carmen, and I created this presentation collaboratively, and she couldn't be here this evening, so I'm presenting for both of us. So tonight we want to provide an update on the state of SEL, or social emotional learning, at Shen. So briefly, just kind of a reminder and overview of what social emotional learning is and the framework that we use when we think about SEL. So the diagram or image that you see on the screen there on the right is from CASEL. And CASEL is sort of the national leader in thinking about what social emotional learning should look like in schools. So there's 5 specific skills or areas that CASEL focuses on, those broad and interrelated areas of competence. And those are self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. So in the CASEL model, which Shenendehowa has adopted and follows, these are 5 skills that we focus on in our counseling program and generally speaking in our instructional program, also as part of our school culture and climate. And these are skills we want students to have and be able to do well when they graduate from Shen. So these are things that we're teaching in classrooms and schools, but also things that we want students to then promote themselves to be responsible citizens after they leave us. So we think these things are really important, and these things are built in directly to the work that we're doing with students K-12, both in the counseling program and then again as part of our general school culture. So just briefly, and I think that this is something we've talked about a lot, but SEL has a lot of benefits. Some of those benefits are direct and benefit students' education, and then some of those benefits are indirect and benefit students just in life in general. So CASEL has done a series of peer-reviewed and long-term studies on the impacts of an effective social emotional learning program in schools. And what they've found is that there are direct academic benefits. Students perform better in the classroom, better on standardized tests like the SAT and ACT, are better behaved, and have overall just better life outcomes when they have strengths in these 5 areas of social emotional learning, those 5 competencies from the previous slide. And these benefits last long into adulthood. So there's benefits that last anywhere from 6 months to 18 years, and these benefits are consistent across socioeconomic status, race, location of school, and a number of other factors. We also think about social emotional learning and its crossover with equity. We believe that social emotional learning is relevant to all students in all schools. It affirms diverse cultures and backgrounds and affirms students regardless of where they're coming from or their family background. We also believe that social emotional learning can be a strategy for systemic improvements. It's not just an intervention for at-risk students. If we think about it from the MTSS perspective, those 3 tiers that we think about all the time, social emotional learning can be tier 1, and it can really benefit all students. And lastly, it can also benefit adults. So when we think about how to support staff at Shen, there are things that we can do as a school district to promote adult SEL and ensure that people's lives and work are balanced and promote longevity in the system, which is important for teachers and educators everywhere. So I just wanted to provide a few examples today of what social emotional learning looks like at different levels. So at the elementary level, we have a curriculum. It's called Second Step, and in all of our K-5 classrooms, teachers and sometimes counselors are teaching Second Step lessons. There's approximately 20 of them every year, and they're all based on those 5 CASEL competencies that we showed you on the couple's previous slides. The topics are the same across grades K through 5, but they're scaffolded. So students are looking at a topic in kindergarten, and then again in first, and again in second, and so on and so forth until they reach 5th grade, and they're exploring it from a different angle and more deeply each year. We're also, of course, incorporating SEL skills into our instruction. So when we think about planning curriculum, teachers are incorporating SEL strategies and skills into that. Just as an example, in elementary school, if you walk into an elementary classroom, you may see students doing a circle or a morning meeting. It's a great SEL strategy that can also tie directly into the pedagogical curriculum that teachers are executing in that space as well. And lastly, at the elementary level, and this is true across all levels, we're implementing restorative practices, and that's connected to some of those circles we've talked about previously as well. And students also have access to resources like the school counselor, school psychologist, and Saratoga Center for the Family in all of our elementary schools, middle school and high school. And that contributes to students' well-being from a social emotional perspective as well. At the middle school level, some things are very similar, others unique to middle school. So we start looking at college and career readiness a lot more closely in middle school, and those things are really aligned to social emotional learning as well. So we want students to be good decision makers, and part of what we do starting in middle school is start thinking about those decisions related to post-secondary. So through Naviance, which is a program we use to connect students to college and career access, there's lessons and programming that's done. We also send students, the last couple of years we've done this, to a giant career fair at Hudson Valley. It's called Career Jam. And there's great SEL connections there as well. So it's really about getting students excited for what's next and helping them to be able to make those good decisions. SEL is also incorporated directly into our health education classrooms. Just one example of this, we use circles in health class to talk about difficult topics with students. So I've participated in circles and health classes where we're talking about self-harm and suicidal ideation. And it's a good way of being able to discuss those really challenging topics that are part of the health curriculum in a way that's safe for students and gives students a way to express themselves with support from a counselor present with follow-up as needed as well. And then lastly, at the high school, so we're doing all these same things at the high school that we're doing at the elementary level and the middle school level, but just in a different way. So recently at the high school, we did a series of community circles right back here in the back classroom in the library, where we asked students, what are the topics that you want to talk about in circles as we go throughout the rest of this school year? And we got phenomenal feedback from students. So this is work that's being done through the EDI committee that Lisa Kissinger and Becky Carmen are in charge of the subcommittee for. And now the high school is going to be implementing community circles where students have the opportunity to come together and discuss academic topics, but also challenging topics that they really need adult support present for. So we're excited to continue that work at the high school as well. So district-wide, we have lots of initiatives going on right now related to social emotional learning. I'll just focus on a couple of them. We've talked a lot about circles. One really exciting thing that's happening right now is the Student Voices project, in collaboration with BOCES. This is something Becky Carmen is really taking the lead on. It's a group of students who are coming together from across the capital region, again, talk about issues like race and really prescient topics that are important to students today. So this is bringing students again together from across the region, and those students coming back here to Shen and leading some conversations right here at High School East. We're continuing to expand our work around restorative practices. We're excited this January to be training several people to become trainers in that work. So we have people in-house who can train existing staff and new staff to the district. And we're seeing already some of the really exciting benefits of restorative practices in the district with the use of circles at the Tier 1 level to really support culture in buildings and in classrooms, and also at higher tiers to respond to discipline incidents in a way that helps students reintegrate back into the school community after they have violated an expectation. So where are we going from here? So I've referenced these MTSS tiers several times throughout the presentation. We're looking to really systematize this work of social emotional learning. And just an example of how this is already happening, we've talked a little bit about second step. That's Tier 1 for all students K-5. An example at Tier 2, serving students with a higher need for intervention would be restorative circles taking place 6-12. And then lastly, Tier 3, the most intensive interventions we can provide to students would be something like Saratoga Center for the Family Counseling or student support counselor services that are provided K-12. And we're excited to continue expanding that work throughout the district. Good. Any questions?
Questions on that?
I was actually stuck on that first statistic, so maybe the needs of 80% of the students. So what does that mean for the other 20%?
Yeah, so if you go back to that slide, Dr. Robinson, so within MTSS, we generally think of Tier 1 as serving all students, but being able to meet the needs of 80%, and then additional interventions,
And the other two? Yeah.
right, would be able to
Got it.
provide for the 15% and the most needy students,
Got
the
it.
5%.
Thank you.
Yeah, of
That
course.
was really good, really helpful.
Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate it. Give me a second here. So, something here.
It's the budget assumptions.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get to carry the presentation. So I'll be somewhat faster than slower, only because we'll be having this conversation over time. So this time of the year, we go to the budget assumption. If you look at the budget calendar, this conversation we've been having internally with different people, so same conversation with different groups of people, to make sure as we fine tune the process, we're getting feedback from wide variety of perspectives. And again, just to when we say assumption, expectation, what do we mean by that? It's a process that we use to think about what data we need to inform our decision making, and then what are the expectations? What do we expect the budget's going to realize as we move forward? This is actually a hyperlink to the budget calendar. as we move forward. So again, you've seen this graphic, and you see it over and over. This is our district mission in the graphical presentation. So this drives all our conversation, be it budget decisions, everything. You've heard Matt just talk about engagement in student voice, driving that conversation around SEL. So there's, everything's connected, right? So we're maximizing time, resources, and otherwise. Our district budget goal is always to have a strategic budget process. So we're always not only thinking currently what we've done, we think what we did, what we're doing, and then what we plan to do in future years. So to continue. The enrollment forecast is a perfect example of that. You look at enrollment trends. We look at the projections. And say, okay, where are we coming from, where are we going, and how is that going to play into, this case, budgetary decisions. Allocation of resources. We look at, again, how to make sure that we're being equitable in the distribution of resources, not only from numbers of kids, but the types of needs, the services that kids need. You're talking about service follow needs. And again, also using the budget more and more to invest in structures that lend to predictability. So structures that lend to consistent instruction. So a perfect example, some of the work that IMS has been doing, trying to have very similar technology in different classrooms. So you don't have a person, because I happen to take my classes here, I don't have the same benefit as if I were to take my classes there. So trying to have those things, and then what those things lend to in terms of the consistency, in this case, instructional delivery for that example. These three questions drive what we do. What else can we do to make the classroom experience more relevant? How do we take advantage of capitalize on emerging changes and cultural shifts? And then ultimately, how do we ensure equity and outcomes for all our students? Recognizing that different experiences lend to different outcomes, and we're not trying to create cookie cutters, we're not making widgets. We're giving kids a quality experience that align with their needs, interests, capacity, capability, otherwise. The framework, we spent a lot of time on last several years fine-tuning this framework document. Essentially drives when we make decisions. So when we think about presentation of the course, okay, so we start with the students. Why are we doing it? What do we hope this to be? What are objectives we hope to realize? How do we best do it? And then obviously how well is how do we measure success, right? So all those things are discussed and determined in advance of making a decision. As we're experiencing it, we're fine-tuning to making sure that when we get to the end, we're not surprised by the outcome. The outcome is supposed to be indicative of the work that we did in the beginning to ensure we get that very predictable outcome at the end. So again, everything is based on the student experience, and I'm not going to go through, again, these are some of the backdrops in terms of the model has allowed, I think probably the biggest thing is the second bullet, is there's so much common language in terms of how we talk about programs and how we prioritize programs, and so it eliminates that feel sometimes that you have competing interests versus have collaborative opportunities. And I think that's a big difference in terms of how the organization looks at itself. Yeah, we may have two different things, but it's not a competing interest. So how do we make those collaborative opportunities become the big part of that conversation piece? So that's a big piece of, again, driven by having this framework that drives what we do. So when we think about budget, every year I try to come up with a theme. I was a little creative this year, only because I think we're at a pivotal point in not only public education, but certain education here in New York. That there's like a whole cycling for this next gen education piece. When we came out of COVID, quite frankly, caused everyone to look at how education is provided differently, and also the value of education. And so certainly New York State as a state is going through some major, gearing us for some potential major transition as a state. So what's that next generation learning? And so when we think about that, we think about, for the next 20, 25 years, what does that look like, right? And so how do we start pivoting towards that direction more so than not? And so yeah, there's certain challenges that we know, financial challenges. You're going to have what I call the traditional challenges of health insurance rates, trying to manage those kind of things as we forward. The fiscal outlook for the state, every time depends on what day you look at it. And we know that with election year cycles, they have a tendency to have some interesting fluctuation in terms of the fiscal outlook on the state. So good, right now it's more positive than negative. It's a good thing. This whole commission just came out. What does that mean? Not necessarily next year, but for years after that. But then again, how do we start pivoting in anticipation of what that would look like in 2025, right? And so we came into 2025 to start pivoting. We got to start pivoting now for anticipation of those kind of things. Simple things such as there are statements in the Blue Ribbon Commission about financial literacy requirement. So is that gonna be a requirement? If so, well, we already have a pretty strong program here. So how do we prepare to pivot that to meet those kind of things? So those are the kind of things we think about. So don't necessarily have any direct singular budgetary piece per se, but things that as we think about the budget, how do we try to see if there are opportunities to pivot, if necessary, as that whole thing unpacks itself. And clearly, for the next several years, the transition to full-day K is gonna be a constant piece of the conversation piece. Opportunities, if you have the audit report in front of you, ironically tonight, talk about the strong fiscal health of the school district. So we're not coming from a place of deficit. We're building on some strong fiscal capacity as we move forward. We have been preparing for the first day we got federal grants. We've been preparing for the last day for federal grants to talk about what's the off-ramp strategy we have. So we're not having big gaps in resource capacity when those federal grants are done next September. Repurposing of retirements, we're going to see what that's going to pan out to be like and try to use that capacity. And ironically, you heard tonight, stable enrollment patterns. So we're not anticipating either those huge dips or huge spikes. Stability in enrollment gives us an end to better predictability and planning, right? So those kind of factors are important for those opportunities in many ways. Then the student realities won't change. We're always going to try to have academic operational excellence. That's something that's part of our mantra, right? Our focus. Where we can, try to have some expanded opportunities again, having all those things being assessed through that framework to make sure that we're making the right decisions for the right reason and also prioritizing the decisions that we're making. And those anticipated needs. Every year there's some unanticipated needs that's known. So how do we try to position ourselves to be flexible enough to address whatever those anticipated needs are as we continue going through this process over the course of the next several months here. Just to unpack a little bit more on some of those same things. Right now, we're looking at health and RX rate. Kudos to Kathy and some of the folks that we contract with to try to manage those kind of things. We're looking at, who knows, around 6 to 8%. Somebody say that's for us, is pretty darn good, where you see some places that are looking double digits. So we're trying to manage that, right? We'll never come in here and say we're going to see a reduction in health insurance rates. That's never going to happen, right? So the question is, how do we manage that so that the impact is manageable within our larger budget sequence? We know what the rates are for retirement pension costs, and so how do we calculate those things out and try to have a sense of what those big rocks are? We're gearing up for negotiation with 2 of our bargaining units. Not large bargaining units, but we still have to take those things into consideration as we build the budget process moving forward. Some operational pieces that are not necessarily singular big picture stuff, but stuff that we want to make sure that we take in consideration as we go through the budget process. For example, the board heard the safety audit. And there's some key components of that safety audit that some things we could do operational, some things we don't have to budget for. So we're going through that process now to identify what those things we need to budget for. Is it going to be a 1-year cycle, 2-year cycle, 3-year cycle? Those kind of things need to be mixed. So those are things that's taken into consideration. Cybersecurity, ironically, we're talking about safety and the changes that whatever. So we're always trying to figure out what else do we need to invest in, because we are more and more technology driven, technology reliant. And so as that becomes more so, we have to make sure that we are also doing the security on the back end, some of those kind of things. Bus electrification, that's a big old rock right now that, quite frankly, we always got to keep in the horizon, but there's a lot of questions related to that. And then the K capacity that I mentioned before. On the other side of it, I mentioned that when we make decisions, we do think about that service following needs. So we think about, what's happening with special ed, what's happening with our ENL population, what's the universal screening, how is that, what information is given us in terms of academic supports for kids. And so how do we make sure then we're using data to drive some of those decisions? And now we have better data to be much more not only long-term decision making, but even on-the-fly progress monitoring, making adjustments throughout the course of the year as well. Some program expansion opportunities. We're trying to see what some things coming out, some new course opportunities coming out of the pipe. And so what are those things that we want to see that we can invest in that could be impactful? And again, recognize we won't do everything everyone wants, so we have to figure out how do we take that very measured approach that if something we do this year will build on last year and create the capacity for future years to come. Big piece of it. And one of the things that I kind of put this on here, because we're having a lot of conversation right now, what's the implication with AI? Up until yesterday, when if you're watching the news, the big disruption with the biggest AI company, everybody's watching that, but as much as they kind of fall apart, the question is what's happening with big companies like Microsoft now. what's gonna happen when those big players get heavy into the AI space? And a perfect example tonight, the Google product that we use, changes happen to that we're not aware of. How does that then impact operations? And so I share that with you because these aren't necessarily budgetary things, but these are things that as we think about the budget, which is a planning process, we have to see what implications those things may have and what can we in fact position ourselves to potentially address as we move forward. So a lot of these things, just thinking things, right, spiraling, and then we have to think about where those opportunities lend themselves. Again, I'm not going to hit all these because it's some repeat pieces, but certainly these are the things that drive the budget process. Anything we put in the budget, new or even preserve the budget, it has to be a value add, right? We're just not adding something because it's interesting and faddish. You know, that's not what we're about. It's about what's the value add for those kind of things. We're talking about cost effectiveness. We're always thinking about opportunities to repurpose resources, right? So we ask the question, if particularly we have vacancies, do we hire the same way or we combine and hire something different? And we did several of that last year, combine different things, and we have much more impactful situations. So that also lends to the personnel management piece as well. And I keep putting the federal COVID dollars on there because we're still very much leveraging those dollars and trying to figure out how do we off-ramp over the course of particularly next year is going to be a big off-ramp year for those federal funds and what do we keep in the budget and what do we off-ramp period off the budget, so to speak. So, and then obviously we kind of keep track of what does that mean, outcome, big picture, data impact, tax impact, those kind of things of that nature. So they kind of give you the flavor that when we do the budget, it's not about any one thing, it's all the things that's taken into consideration as we move forward, and then we kind of prioritize value add. If the budget doesn't add value, we don't have a good budget. If we have a budget that's only about reducing tax implication, we don't have a good budget because the bottom line is still spend a lot of money. So what's the point of spending a lot of money and not getting the value add on the other side of the equation, right? So I think that's a big part of the budget process as we go through it. Some of the things, again, right now, there's a lot more questions you'll see because we're early in the process. So once we get, for example, a sense of what retirements look like, what does that look like, right? How many retirement, what levels, and what does that implication of that? You know, so we have, whatever, conversation purposes, we have 10 retirement elementary levels. So, okay, what does that mean? Do we have to backfill all 10 of them, or is it backfill 8 of them? Or do we do something else? You know, so we have those conversations because that leveraging the resources potentially do something else within the budget without changing the cost footprint significantly of the budget. So we added capacity without adding dollars per se. Some of the things that we certainly, when you think about off-ramping, some of the things that we know that in this budget we want to keep, there are certain AIS positions that we want to keep some of those capacity as we off-ramp out of the federal budget. There's certain positions that we paid for out of the federal. The instructional coach for Wit and Wisdom, for a perfect example, we want to keep for a number of years because it's a huge undertaking to get that program as a part of the fabric. Some of the position around mental health counseling, we want to off-ramp, incorporate those things back into the budget sequence but we have another grant that we're applying for. Hopefully it'll give us another 2 years of additional capacity. So cross our fingers, hopefully that will work. But if it doesn't, we don't plan on hope, by the way. This is not a hope budget. This is a, so we have to have the contingency. If this doesn't look per, then how do we maintain certain things that we added this year? Mental health services, we expanded Saratoga Center for the Family Mental Health Services quite a bit. And so how do we make sure that we can sustain that beyond the federal dollars as we move forward? Summer, same thing. Summer, we had more kids this past summer doing summer enrichment. And so we can't say, oh, sorry kids, we don't, because it was a federal thing, we're gonna drop back. So how do we maintain those things as we move forward? And instruction and technology obsolescence, we fast forward our tech purchases big time over the last 2 years. And now we have to have the obsolescence plan because we can't have all those things come to date at the same time because it's a huge one, graveyard of computers, and two, huge cost replacement. So how do we tier that out over the course of several years as we move forward? So those are some of the off-ramp things that we think about. Enrollment-driven demands that again, you heard the enrollment piece tonight, and I was even looking at some elementary enrollment, for example, today. We won't have a huge need demands from enrollment. Just be fairly here and there, tweak here and there, versus in past years, we were adding courses, we're adding FTEs because class size issues. We have gone beyond those points now, right? So it's more about how do we stabilize and keep certain things moving forward. And then there's some expansion opportunities. Certainly, we have been a lot of focus on the secondary expansion, particular college credit-related type courses for kids across the board, right? So it's changing the whole definition of who's a quote-unquote college-type student. Every kid has a potential of acquiring some type of credential. So how do we position those young people to acquire some credential that we know is going to be beneficial to them into adulthood? And that goes with the apprenticeship piece, the internship piece. How do we really, so that next generation of student is not about, just simply having a textbook in front of you. It's about application of everything. It's about experience. And so we've been doing it for years. So this budget, again, really want to make sure that we keep true to those things as we move forward. And even part of our goal is student engagement. So a lot of excitement, particularly now at the elementary levels, to have more opportunities for engagement of kids. And we know that when kids get hooked early, they stay with it, right? But when they get turned off early, they also stay turned off throughout. So how do we make sure that those engagement opportunities are rich engagement opportunities that really again empower kids that sense of agency. They want kids to be learners, not only academic learners, but just learners of life, having an appreciation of learning new things and being intrigued and have innovative thoughts and being creative, all those kind of things that we want people to be ultimately, and certainly want our students to have experiences. There'll be some operational enhancements. We're working through some of those things. That's why this question is about today. So as we unpack the budget process internally, there are some of these things. The budget, this presentation won't capture everything we do. It's going to capture some big rocks as examples of some of the things that we do, because a lot of stuff just be baked into our budget codes anyway for certain things that we just do as a part of operations or maintenance. But there were some unique things that we're adding, that's going to add some new dimension. We'll highlight those things here as we unpack those things as we move forward. And so this, by the way, everybody asked about this picture. So there was I don't know who you want to be like, dress up like your principal day or something. And this little kid, and I told Mr. Jones, you'll never have a kid that handsome, but it's okay. So I'm just joking. But it's just a handsome picture, right? But the kid should have worn glasses. It would have been perfect. They're a perfect picture of him. So it's neat. So if people ask me why do they look alike, is that his son? No, it's not. It was a kid who dressed up like him at the school. So one of the things that's kind of basic, this is like, I say people, if people just want a budget number, I can give you a budget number. And so the whole slide at this point, it's not about a number. The budget is not about a number. The budget is a planning process. Because at the end of the day, we know what our budget is right now. We know what operational piece is. Basically, if we just roll all the stuff we do, and we know what's going to cost difference, right? Then we know what those strategic additions going to be. And then that's our proposed budget. So from a calculation perspective, actually a very simple equation. However, that's the easy part of it. This becomes the easy part of the process. It's all the other stuff that goes into thinking about what are the big rocks that we want to make sure to take into consideration as we put the budget process together. So that gives a good framework, if you will, as a board, as we unpack the budget process with a bunch of folks. And then I'll just punctuate this. Jason, I went 3 minutes longer than I thought. My apologies. I was shooting for 6:45. I couldn't see the time. Just to give a perfect example of this, we had, when was Leadership Academy? Last Thursday? Yep. Last Thursday in this room, probably whatever, all our administrative supervisors, 50 folks, we have a little protocol that I use to have people sit in small groups and talk about, what are the things that we need to stop doing? What are the things that we need to modify? What are the things that we need to continue? And then what are some new things that we need to start, right? And so having people independently and writing those things, getting the group talking through it, then you start seeing commonalities. So you see folks who you think wouldn't be thinking about, they're thinking about it. So it forces all of us, one, to be on the same page and thought moving forward, but it captures information in a way that everyone contribute to the process in a very unique way. So those kind of things drive the conversation. So when we have a budget, the plan, and we execute on the plan, everyone is responsible for the execution of the plan. So the budget isn't Kathy's or mine, or it's the organizational plan to move forward. So I'll stop there. Thoughts, questions that you may have?
This is more of a statement rather than a question, I guess, but maybe we can comment on it. So there are several schools in the area that I believe under the community eligibility provision are now eligible for free breakfasts and lunches for everybody.
No, so yeah.
Why are you guys laughing at
No,
me?
only because Jason said an email about it earlier.
Oh, really?
That's
You
why
were
something
gonna
else.
mention it too,
No.
did I take your time?
No.
And for people who don't realize, the threshold has dropped from 40% to 25% of eligible students. And if the district, well, the school within the district, right? So it's not the district,
Correct,
it's
correct.
individual
This could be
school.
both, yeah.
Reaches that, then every student can get a free
Yeah.
breakfast.
So, yes, great statement. And, 21st. Some point, soon, we'll be, making some, we have 3 of our schools that are eligible for that threshold. Katie's working through some stuff now, logistics, and once we work through those logistics, we'll be sending out some correspondence, to those parents and families, those 3 schools clearly the board I informed you. We're not ready for public right now because we want to work through some logistics. Because it's going to be, we're going to have the question of why this school versus this school. Because it's not a hard and fast formula, it's relative to your school. And so you have some places that are district eligible because they have 95% free and reduced lunch student. So we're not that place, right? And so, so we'll have some benefit from that. And so we're working through the logistics of that because, so here's the irony of this. So what's the uptick in capacity need now when you're feeding more kids? All of a sudden, before we only actually had X number of kids just doing breakfast, but now if you have X times 2, you need more capacity to effectively provide X times 2. So those are the logistics that we have to work through versus if you were in a system that you already had 90% of your kids, you already had staff to feed 90% of your kids. Now they're just not paying for it, right? So those are the kind of things we look for. Yes, so we're looking to take advantage of those as we're eligible to take advantage of it. Yeah. Other thoughts, questions from the board? Other than that, Madam President, I'm done for the day.
Thank you. It's a lot, but very good and important. So we're going to move into the consent items. And the first item up are the minutes from our last meeting. We needed more people present to vote on this one. So, but I'll first say Deanna did have to leave early for a family matter. For the October 3rd minutes, Deanna and Stacy were not present, and you can abstain if you wish. So at this point, can I have a motion to approve the October 3rd minutes? First is Gusta, second is Tom. All in favor? It is 5 in favor and 1 abstention. Thank you. Moving into the action items. We have the pilot agreement for solar energy. Can I have a motion to approve the solar pilot agreement? First is Jason, second is Stacy. Any questions or comments?
I'll just for clarification, pilot is payment in lieu of taxes. This is not us piloting a solar farm on campus or something like that. Just
Correct. I'm glad you did that. No.
And it is with NYSERDA, so there will be a benefit associated with that. So I got a first and I had a second, and a comment. All in favor? It is 6 in favor. Thank you. The next item up on our agenda is the employment training. Sorry, did you have a question?
Sorry.
Okay. All right. Is the, okay, so next item up is employment training for adults. And this one specifically is for training of our maintenance staff through Wish BOCES. Can I have a motion to approve the employment training for adults contract? First is Gusta, second is Tom, all in favor? It is 6 in favor. Thank you. The next one is special education. Can I have a motion to approve the special education contract for tuition with sale at Ferncliff? First is Jason, second is Stacy. Any comments or questions? All in favor? It is 6 in favor. Thank you. And that's it for the contracts. We move into for good of the order. And this is an opportunity for board members to discuss salient issues related to matters from a policy perspective or to give a shout out. Is there something anybody would like to share?
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was hoping that would be said at some point. I wanted to share the same sentiment. I'm looking I'm very excited that my nest is full, as I'm sure some others here that have college students. So yes, I wish everybody a warm and happy Thanksgiving. And so
Adjournment.
with that, oh, well, number 6 is for informational purposes, and then we move to adjournment. Can I have a motion to adjourn? First is Jason, second is Tom, all in favor? It is 6 in favor. Thank you. And